Hey gamers, Battle Gamer here, and another set of RPG tips for you and your game. Not the storyteller one yet. I will get to that one. But for the most part, most people will be playing as characters, so that's why I'm taking my time to talk about the characters before I actually get down to the nitty gritty of GMing. So, anyway, as a character, one of the hardest questions a player has to ask is what kind of character should I make? This is probably one of the most fundamental parts about the game because the kind of character you make is the kind of character you're going to end up playing. So you have to decide on what kind of character suits your personal playstyle. Now, a large majority of people who play these kind of games like to play combat based characters, and that is completely fine. There is absolutely nothing wrong with that. Even if you like to get the exact scores you need and have the exact kind of stats to make your character completely badass in combat, that's all good and great. But the thing is if your character is lacking, if you don't connect to your character, if no one else can connect to your character, you're just gonna be a faceless badass, and in the end, no one will really remember your character for who they were, but just what they done. And if you're fine with them, that's fine. But here's some tips on how to help make your character interesting. Number one, the most important part of your character is to understand what role your character is going to have in the game. Not all games have necessarily as specific a role as Pathfinder and D&D might with the warrior or the wizard, but nonetheless, you have to decide and you have to please discuss with the other members of the group what kind of role you want to take and try to balance your party out to make it the most interesting. Though, as an important note, do not make every single person in the group so uniquely different in role that no one can actually work together. Hello? Hi. Do not make your character so different from the other characters that you cannot actually work together. It's really nice when a group has a wizard, a mage, or a warrior, and a rogue, and I don't know, a ranger. But the thing is that if none of those characters can actually work together, nothing really is going to happen. So if you're going to have a blasty kind of mage or a high damage archer, don't be afraid to take a warrior who's more defensive and better at calling aggro from the enemies. On the flip side, if you have a more utility mage, don't be afraid to make a more aggressive, high damage warrior and go a little bit less on the defensive. The wizard will try to cover your back. So, character and your role is what's super important. Number two, when you're making your character, one of the other more important things in some games, and not necessarily in others, is determining what kind of race or what kind of racial profile your character will have. Now, on the part of racism, it's not necessarily good to play super high into the stereotypes of specific races because it makes your character feel cookie cutter, even if it's like the normal like Caucasian, African American, or African in general, Islamic. If you make such characters, uh, if you go heavy into the stereotypes, it might be funny, but at the same time, you'll have a cookie cutter character. So when you're picking the type of character you have, make it research the character or research their race and then make a decision on what aspect of it you really want. For instance, I could make an Irishman, I don't know, an Irish human in some game. Well, typically it's like they're either a ladies' man, Casanova, or they're a drunk. But a lot of Irish history has to do with respecting the spirits, honoring the dead, being absorbed into the battle, like Cuchulainn and some of the other Irish heroes. So do your research. Take an aspect like Cuchulainn was a really good one. He was the son of one of the deities. He was a fantastic warrior. He took on hundreds of men by himself. Uh, in the end, when he was to die, he actually tied himself to a boulder and fought people off with his gay bolg, which was a spear. He also was able to invoke Riastrad, which was becoming so involved in combat, he literally, like, physically became a monster and killed hundreds of people. So that is an Irish aspect, but that's not a stereotype. Um, a really good thing about the African culture, especially, is they have a lot of they have there's a few they either have like the Caribbean, um, like the voodoo, which is super interesting in itself, the various spirits and how they interact with uh, the undead and turning people into living zombies, or you could even go like South Africa, in which it's more about taking on the aspects of the beasts and having a certain kind of spiritualness involved with the creatures of the savannah. Those are two interesting aspects that don't necessarily have to do with, being a very fit, very physically capable black guy, or very, uh, I don't know, a very victimized kind of black guy as a stereotype, like always talking about white people and all that kind of stuff. Kind of like Chris Rock did in his comedy, if you know who Chris Rock is. So take your character's race and make it and do research on it so that you can make your character more interesting. Don't just play on your stereotypes, because then your character is just like any other stereotype based character. Number 3, understand the type of role or the type of class your character plays, and then try to make it unique onto your own playstyle. This kind of relates back to picking a role for your character, but instead of specifying just to your role, also make your character's abilities kind of unique onto himself. Sometimes a character might have a kind of, oh, what's it called? Like a quirk, or like this rogue, the super thiefy kind of rogue, actually was a born sorcerer. He has like one level in sorcerer, and so he can actually do these really minor magical things, but you would never know looking at the character. It's something the character kind of hides himself. But even though that one level kind of hurts his stats, stat wise, it makes the character more interesting, and it also kind of plays into what his bloodline is and things your storyteller can even pick up on. So don't be afraid to take your characters and tweak them just a little bit to make them unique. Make sure it's something that helps your character, don't but make sure it doesn't necessarily like play overly deep into their role. Another aspect of the same, kind of crafting your character in a sense, is make equipments or make little things about your character very unique unto themselves. For instance, your character has a very expensive hairpin that was actually an heirloom from their family. Or maybe your character crafted his own gear that he is currently wearing. That's also another interesting aspect. That all, and now, never mind. I'm thinking a little further. But anyway, the even though you're performing your role, make your role unique to yourself. Number 4, make your character have a life outside of the campaign. This is super duper duper important because it really will make your character have something he can do or have a sense of purpose that goes beyond the actual story. Now, the story will probably become the main part of your character's life. There's no real doubt about that. But have your character have something ulterior. Usually, this is taken up by some kind of job. But your character might be a very exquisite artist, even though they're, a hardened veteran warrior. Or maybe they like to sew dolls. Make it a part of your character and make one skill really, really high so that you have the ability to pretty much succeed in any role you do when you do it. Even though a more well-rounded out character will be useful in more situations, a more specialized character will have more use in or will have more purpose in their specific uses. A jack of all trades is good because a character who can do anything is useful in more situations. But a character who is a master at whatever they do will always do something amazing with their role. So, don't be afraid to specialize your character and make sure your character has something that goes outside of the campaign, that goes outside of combat is usually the best way to go. But even if it is in combat, make it something that they are super unique in combat. This could be anywhere from your character is actually a demolition expert, and in combat, if they aren't the target, for instance, they can actually set up explosives rather than just going in and attacking someone. Number five, and usually in my list, one of the most important things to do to when making Number five, and honestly, one of in most of my lists, it'll be one of the most important aspects of my tips. When making a character, the number one thing you absolutely have to do is get into character. Get into character so that whenever you make whatever character you make, have an idea what you want to do and then get into character. This way, your character will develop themselves just by being in character, and you'll even lose yourself. So when you're making your character, think of what kind of personality they have and think of what their objectives and goals might be. One of my more popular and famous characters is a large one-armed zealot witch hunter, in a sense. He's a monster hunter. And what I did when I made that character is, one, I wanted to make him very blunt and to the point, but I also wanted to make him he's all about his strength. He's absurdly strong despite missing an arm. So I really wanted to make him strong personality, and strong, does everything with brute force. But then something I also did was he actually is super awkward in normal situations and normal social situations. He's not afraid to yell at people, but when it just comes to interacting with people he doesn't need to yell at, he kind of gets awkward and he kind of shies away. So when I got into the character, I had those moments where he was, I'm going to punch you in the face. And then the other moments he's just like, he goes and wanders off and kind of avoids looking at the pretty girl in the face or something like that. Decide on what kind of character personality you really want, what kind of traits you really want to exaggerate because it is a game. And then your character will begin to play themselves. Anyway, gamers, ciao for now. Good luck making your characters. If you need any help, please leave a message in the comments below or message me. Give me a private message or whatever it is on YouTube. And I'll be more than happy to help you out. See you in the next episode.